Like most normal people, the first thing I do when I wake up is search Marketplace for old, mistreated BMWs. On the morning of October 16th, 2024, I came across an ad for this 1999 BMW 528i Touring with the legendary ZF 5-speed manual transmission. Naturally, I skipped work and embarked on an epic 13-hour journey to buy it. In a rented truck, pulling a rented trailer, I made the trek up to the United States' most northeastern state, Maine. I informed the rental agency that I expected the journey would take me approximately 600 miles. When I returned the truck, its odometer indicated that I had traveled exactly 600 miles, not 599, not 601, but exactly 600. It felt auspicious to say the least. The car was what one would expect a $2,000 marketplace purchased vehicle to be. Each panel scratched and dented, strange sounds emanating from the engine bay, and an annoying electrical issue that caused the right side turn signals to blink ceaselessly without any input from the indicator stock. However, unlike most E39 chassis BMWs from the Northeast, the body was remarkably free of rust, and it ran and drove onto and off of the trailer without any issues. In this episode, I will begin restoring this E39 Touring, focusing mostly on ensuring that I check off a few boxes on the expectedly long list of deferred maintenance items in the engine bay. This episode is just the beginning of what will be a long and detailed restoration, with originality and reliability being the two main aims for the finished product. The first order of business is to uncover the mystery behind this engine bay's apparently masticated foam insulation and to clean up the mess my olfactory sense tells me the perpetrators left behind. Then, on to examining the engine's health via a compression test. Well, it looks like the source of our electrical issues is exactly what I expected it to be. Mice. They clearly ate through this foam, built a nest here, and I'm sure traveled through the car, eating up a few wires here and there. So that means, unfortunately, we're going to have to trace down the damage they did, and I'm also going to have to do a whole lot of cleaning in this engine bay and wherever else they may have traveled throughout this car. I just want this engine bay to be clean enough for me to work in it comfortably without coming into contact with toxic mouse poop and urine. And I also want it to look decent just as a baseline. Of course, I'm going to do a lot more to kind of beautify this engine bay, clean it up more thoroughly at some point, and also replace some things that are missing, like those caps, and just do a general overall detail of it, as well as, of course, fixing the leaks, which you probably can't see, but there are, sections where there's sludge still left behind, even though I just cleaned it. So yeah, we have a long way to go with this engine bay, but this is just the initial kind of step so that I can work on the car without coming into contact with stuff that'll make me sick. So I'm going to do a compression test here just to ensure the engine is healthy. So you can see here there's the fuse box, and here's a very helpful little card that tells you that you need to remove fuses 17 and 31 to disable the fuel pump, So I'm going to do that now. That's a 10 amp, 31. Seems to be another 10 amp. So that's how you disable the fuel pump. That's definitely a spark plug that needs to be replaced. And it was it is very, very corroded, you can see, and it was very hard to get out. It felt almost like it was cross-threaded, but I mean, it doesn't look like it was, luckily. Number 2. Using this old torque wrench that definitely needs to be calibrated. Wow. I've never struggled that hard to get a spark plug out. But same deal with this one. These have all thus far been Bosch Platinum plugs. They look very old. I'm sure they are very old and definitely need to be replaced. What a battle. And you would think, or at least I would think, that it would be easy to pull a spark plug out when it's covered in oil from a leaking valve cover gasket, but apparently not. I'm literally out of breath and sweating. Maybe it's a little too hot in here, but I just can't believe this. I've never experienced spark plugs. I mean, this one, absolutely covered in sludge. I just know this car is going to be a whole lot of fun. Surprisingly, number 6 came out without really giving up too much of a fight. However, it's absolutely soaked in oil, and the whole socket was dripping when I pulled it out. And you can just see the whole spark plug. So yeah, clearly this valve cover gasket totally shot. Got my compression tester here, a very handy one with a quick disconnect. So just kind of thread this in. That seems right. Then a quick disconnect right on there. I'll put the gauge there. Okay, take 2. Definitely has compression, I guess. So we have right at 210. So it's exactly 210 on the first cylinder. And almost exactly 210 on the second cylinder, so that's a good sign thus far. Well, exactly 210, or almost exactly 210 on cylinder 3. Just under 210 on 4. Well, first cylinder here that's not looking great. We're at 180 on that one, so that's a bit worrying. That's definitely not right. So that's like 230 or something. Right under 230. Not great. In terms of consistency, so we had 210 across the 4 first ones, 180 on the 5th one, and now we're having around 230, 225 on the 6th cylinder. So I'm going to do a little bit of research and see if that's acceptable. I'm definitely not pleased with cylinder number 5 in terms of the consistency here. Unfortunately, I just came back from a funeral, which is why I'm dressed this way. But I did a little bit of research and I discovered an interesting video that was posted a while back by M3 name is Josh Miller on YouTube. Shout out to him. Where he compression tested his E36 328IS with the same M52B28 engine. He discovered that the low compression on that engine was caused by the piston rings seizing inside the piston grooves, not allowing them to seal to the cylinder walls. So I'm hoping that that's our issue here, and that we can solve it by simply running an engine flush through the engine, changing the oil, and then doing a wet compression test. If that doesn't solve it, I'll do further diagnosis, but for now, we're going to replace the spark plugs, run the engine flush, change the oil, and then come right back to where we are now, compression test the engine, and hope for the best. We may end up having to rebuild this engine, but my hope is that I can solve it by simply unsticking those piston rings. One reason I think that may be an issue with this engine is that when I open the valve cover here and run my finger in it, obviously there's a lot of sludge, so I'm sure the inside of this engine doesn't look spick and span, and likely the person who owned it before me, or the several people who owned it before me, didn't adhere to the 5,000 mile or 6-month oil change intervals, and this car over the course of its life was, I'm sure, neglected quite a bit, and wasn't driven for the past, I don't know how long, but at least several months. It has electric issues and wasn't registered when I purchased it. So my hope is that those piston rings are seized and that we can simply unstick them, and that solves the compression. Maybe it's a bit of a long shot, but hey, I've got to at least give it a try before I start ripping apart this engine. These get 22 foot-pounds or around 30 newton meters of torque. Got a new coil pack for cylinder 2 here, which is the one that was misfiring. Got some engine flush going in here. This is just going to kind of clean the engine up, hopefully dislodge some of the contaminants, sludge, and all that that's built up in this engine. And we can only hope dislodge the piston rings. 1 container is sufficient for 5 liters, so I'm going to need a little bit more from the second container. And that should be sufficient for this engine's 6.9 quart or 6.5 liter oil capacity. So I just let the car run for quite some time, drove it around a little bit. We're up on jack stands now, and I'm going to change the oil. Alright, so now that the oil filter is out, I'm going to just check it out, make sure we don't have any metal shavings in here, or I should say, check to see if we do. Which it doesn't appear that we do. It also doesn't appear, unfortunately, that, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, that there's a whole lot of sludge in here, like there's no big chunks, which maybe indicates that the engine was never as dirty as I kind of envisioned it being. Or it might mean that the engine flush just didn't work as well as I had hoped. But I'm not seeing any metal shavings anywhere in this filter. In fact, it looks pretty normal. It doesn't look all that old. Alright, so I'm going to remove these O-rings here and replace them. New oil filter. Forgot about this O-ring here, so I'll replace that one as well. I'm just going to take a little bit of oil here, a little bit of fresh oil. Clean out my finger here. Get a little bit of fresh oil. And just lubricate the new O-rings. Alright, so we have this interesting situation where there's a magnetic drain bolt, and it seems to have a whole bunch of sludge built up on it, which is strange because I would expect it to be just metal shavings with maybe a little bit of sludge, but this is like thick sludge on it, which I assume is metal, metallic flakes that are kind of embedded in dirt. I mean, this is literally like clay consistency. Very, very strange. It's not really what I expected to find, which was just, a bunch of metal shavings. This kind of muddy substance definitely seems to have a metallic quality, so my guess is this is a somewhat metallic substance, just a mix of dirt from the engine and metal shavings, but really, really sticky, really gross. So I'm going to clean that off. And I'll certainly be changing the oil pretty soon when I replace the oil pan. We may also do the rod bearings when I do that. So we'll check back up on this drain bolt and we'll see if it picks up more metallic shavings. But for now, I'm just going to clean it up, reinstall it with a new crush washer. I fill up the oil filter housing here with some oil just to pre-lube the filter. Well, you're not going to believe it, but we actually fixed the compression. Not so fast. If I'm being honest, which I can't help but to be, it's unlikely that we, strictly speaking, fixed this engine with just an engine flush. Instead, these compression results more likely reveal a much more substantial issue: scored cylinder walls. A large delta between dry and wet compression numbers is a standard indicator. I will examine the cylinder walls in a future episode. Due to this car's electrical issue, its battery must be disconnected when parked. E39 Tourings have electronic hatch actuators, so in order to access the battery when it's dead or disconnected, one must crawl through the rear seat area and trunk to access the manual release located behind the carpeted panel on the inside of the hatch. Not the best sounding start. And now to remove, disassemble, and rebuild the Vanos unit. Quite a lot of disassembly in the engine bay was required for this, and naturally I used the opportunity to replace some of the engine's disposable accessories. This undershield was very clean when I put it on. So let's see how much oil, power steering fluid, coolant, etc. is on it now. Well, there goes some. Right in my mouth. Ugh. I'm going to drain the coolant here just because we're going to be doing some work to the cooling system, replacing the expansion tank and some of the hoses. Alright, there's a T20 holding in this auxiliary water pump. And then we can remove this pump from the bracket here. Now the fan shroud should be free from the bottom here. All these hoses and that pump, we should be good to grab it from the top. I didn't expect to be able to remove the fan clutch with just a adjustable wrench and a hammer, as easily at least as I did, but I did that off camera by accident. So now I'm just going to spin off the fan clutch to remove it. Next, we're removing the expansion tank from the fan shroud. Now we should be able to remove the shroud. One connector there. We have this overflow hose that needs to be removed. This one clearly has been removed once before, as it has a non-original clamp, which is actually more convenient. And then you can either remove the hoses from the expansion tank or just remove the expansion tank itself from the shroud. And we now have access to the Vanos unit and we can proceed. Alright, we will be replacing the expansion tank and this little hose here, so the overflow hose. So I'm going to remove these lines, these coolant hoses from the tank. Let those drain. I'm going to close these coolant hoses off so we don't get anything in the cooling system. I'm going to put a cap over the overflow hose outlet right there. Okay, so now we're going to remove the Vanos unit and rebuild it. First, we're going to remove the valve cover completely. Never seen that happen. We have a couple Vanos solenoid electrical connectors that need to be removed. That one for the intake and this one for the exhaust. Next, the thermostat electrical connector needs to be removed. Then we remove this Vanos line with a 19mm wrench. And next we remove the engine lifting bracket. Next we're going to be removing these Vanos front cover bolts, which are 8mm hex. And when you remove these, you want to be prepared with some towels and a catch can underneath there so that you don't spill a bunch of oil on the floor. And I'm going to be replacing, that one actually didn't have a bunch of oil in it, surprisingly, but I'm going to be replacing that accessory belt, the AC belt. But if you're not, you definitely want to make sure that you protect that from any oil dripping on it. So quite a lot of oil from the exhaust side. Next, you want to remove these little plastic caps here. Next are these left-hand threaded Torx bolts. They're T30s, and you remove them by going clockwise because they're reverse threaded. There are 6 10mm bolts holding in the bottom of the Vanos. As well as one 13mm upper bolt. And finally, we can actually remove the Vanos unit. I'm going to put a plastic bag around it because it's going to leak quite a lot of oil. Someone zip tied a wiring loom to this exhaust Vanos solenoid, so I'm going to snip that off. And we'll be all set to totally remove this Vanos unit from the car. I'm going to remove the old gasket, which obviously we'll be replacing. So we have the Vanos unit out of the car. I've just cleaned the outside of it, and I'm going to begin disassembling it, starting by removing these 10mm bolts. So the exhaust side piston came out with the cover. The intake piston did not. It's still in here, so I'm going to remove that. And these are the seals that we'll be replacing here and here. Well, unfortunately, we've been stalled here because this Vanos unit is not rebuildable. This exhaust side cover has some pretty extreme scoring marks. If you can see that. So it's supposed to be a very smooth finish, and it's not. It's very, very scratched up. That's also visible on the main unit here, which obviously is a little bit harder to pick up and show you guys, but there is some pretty clear pitting and scoring right in here that you can both see and feel. You can probably see right there, maybe not, but if I bring the light over, yeah. So there is visible and tactile, damage to this unit. So I now have some thinking, some research, and probably a whole lot of money to spend. I figure we may as well do the belts, pulleys, and tensioners while we have access. So let's start with this AC belt. Belt doesn't look too bad, but I'll definitely be replacing it. That's a crusty old water pump right there. I've got a mask on because I just did a bunch of cleaning to the front here with some brake cleaner, and the smell is horrendous. So yeah, let's remove these coolant hoses and thermostat, do a little bit more cleaning, and then replace them. Newton meters on these bolts here. Final thing to remove before we begin reassembling the belts and pulleys is this water pump. Here's a comparison of old on the right and new on the left. Going in, These get torqued to 10 Newton meters or 7.4 foot-pounds. "14 foot-pounds for the tensioner bolts. And I'm going to spray it down with some fluid film, as I am doing to all of these new shiny components, so that they don't oxidize. And then obviously I'm going to wipe off that pulley before installing the belt. New water pump pulley. And you'll never guess it, these get torqued to 10 Newton meters. So I'm replacing the tensioner here, and it looks old because it is. I've only replaced the hydraulic part because that's what wears out. I'm going to torque these to 14 foot-pounds as well, even though I don't really know if that's the torque spec for this tensioner. It just seems right since it was the torque spec for the other one. Obviously this tensioner is hydraulic, the other one is spring loaded. And we've got naturally a new pulley with even a new bolt going on this tensioner. Again, I'm not sure what the torque spec is on this pulley, but based on the idler pulley torque, I'm going to torque this one to 30 foot-pounds. And we're also going to compress this new hydraulic piston a few times, which will put it well within torque spec. And speaking of idler pulleys, a new one going on here. There's a notch right here, and that lines up with this little nipple on the pulley. And then again, we've got 30 foot-pounds on this. Alright, new drive belt going on. Alright, we're going to compress the tensioner, release it, and the belt is on. Got a few plastic caps there, one there, and finally one here. Alright, let's reinstall the Vanos. I'm gonna just give this mating surface a little clean before we put the new gasket on. New gasket going on. I got a new O-ring for this camshaft position sensor. There are a couple options for rebuilt Vanos units. I decided to purchase a fully rebuilt one from Probsten Tech in Germany. It sent me back roughly $600 with shipping. These get tightened to a mere 6 foot-pounds. So next you want to make sure that the intake piston is pushed all the way so that it's making contact. Then we have some new bolts here. I'm sure you could reuse the old ones, but I opted for new ones. These get torqued to 6 foot-pounds as well. Next we have the new caps with the upgraded Teflon O-rings going in. And next up, the cover bolts. These get torqued to 37 foot-pounds or 50 Newton meters. Next we're installing the engine lift bracket, and first you want to route this electrical harness. I'm going to plug in the thermostat connector there. This harness obviously needs some electrical tape. The old tape was peeling off and I just don't have any at the moment, so I'm going to have to come back and redo that. Seven foot-pounds or 10 Newton meters on this. Next up, the banjo bolt with new crush washers, and I'll be replacing this Vanos oil line in the future, but for now we're going to be reusing it along with this banjo bolt. Alright, new valve cover gasket. Now ideally I would clean this valve cover, but I've had just about enough of trying to clean these intricate passageways, and I just don't really want to deal with that right now. So for the time being, I'm going to leave it as it is. I clean the mating surface up. I'm now going to apply some sealant to the areas of concern here, the mating surface between the Vanos unit and the head, and also in the back the two half moons, as well as the two half moons here. Just kind of apply it to the corners. Got some zip ties on the valve cover to hold the gasket in place, and it's only sort of working because I needed one more. 6 foot-pounds on these. Astute viewers may have noticed that I initially forgot one of the Vanos nuts, so here I'm applying it and torquing it. I'm going to tape up these wires before we put everything back together. I forgot to order new screws for the fan clutch, so I'm just cleaning these ones up, and they came out pretty well thus far. The fan clutch is the really crucial part to replace, but I opted to replace the fan as well, since the plastic is now 26 years old. I'm assuming it was never replaced. I'm going to assemble the new expansion tank. There's a little mark I put on the hose and the tank. I'll line those marks up to orient it how it was on the other one. We have a new bleed screw and a new cap. I'm going to clean this fan shroud up a little bit before I reinstall it. Alright, now I'm going to blow it off with some compressed air. I'm going to put the new coolant tank on here. Fan shroud going back in with the new fan and fan clutch. Before we start the car up, I'm going to replace the air filter. And we have a mouse nest. That's mouse nest number 2 for this car. Super dirty air filter. Cabin air filter time. I'm going to clean out the boxes and replace the filters. And here we go, 24-year-old fuel filter. That's remarkable, and I'm glad I'm replacing it. All right, I'm gonna cut some new fuel lines. Scissors are not the way to go here. You wanna use a knife, and ideally a knife that's a little sharper than this one, but we'll saw through it eventually. There we go. And I'm cutting the second section of fuel line here. This one I believe is supposed to be a preformed piece with an extra shield on it. So I'm gonna look for that, but for now, because I damaged the fuel line when I was removing it, I do have to actually replace it. All right, new fuel filter going in. Here's the new fuel filter. I installed it with new fuel hoses right here and over here as well. That finishes up the filters segment of this part of the video. Some fresh coolant going in. What I'm adding is a 50-50 blend of BMW OEM coolant and distilled water. I have the bleed screw on the thermostat cracked, and once coolant comes out of that, I'm going to start the car up. I'm adding just a little bit of oil to make up for the oil we lost from the old Vanos unit. So I filled up the cooling system up to the point where the bleed screw at the thermostat started leaking. Now that's closed, the cap is on, and I'm going to start the car up. I'm leaving the engine covers and the cabin air filter channel off for now, just in case we have any issues. First start. Well, life has essentially eliminated my ability to be happy. But if I had the ability to be happy, I would be pretty happy right now with what just happened. A clean startup with apparently no issues. And the engine sounded great. I didn't hear anything that sounded concerning. I'm just going to continue to bleed the cooling system. I'm going to clean this area up a little bit. Our former rodent residents left us some debris, so that's nice. And that wraps up episode 1. Obviously, we just scratched the surface in terms of what needs to be done, no pun intended, to get this car back on the road in reliable, dailyable fashion. So there will be more episodes in the future. I hope to see you for those, and thank you for watching this one. Bye now.